Welcome everyone to a meeting of the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller, represent Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostmo.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Sam Taylor of the MPO staff at staylor@ctps.org or 857-702-3702 or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. First item on the agenda is introductions. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Mascot seat 1.
This is, I'm sorry. Is that me? Or that's John Bouchard or me? That's me? I'm David.
Yes.
I'm David Moeller. I represent Secretary Tibbetts-Nutt here.
Thank you so much. Mascot seat 2.
Good morning. This is John Bouchard representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver.
Thank you. Mascot Highway Division, please.
MassDOT Highway Division, John Romano here.
Thank you. MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy Johnston here representing General Manager Filling in the MBTA.
Good morning. Next we have the Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Morning, Tyler Cherasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA here.
Thank you. Massport.
Good morning, Sarah Lee representing Massport.
Good morning. MAPC.
Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Hi, Hannah Switlikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
Thank you. Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, RTEC Chair here.
City of Boston, seat 1.
This is Jen Rowe representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
City of Boston, seat 2.
Hi, this is Nayeli Rodriguez, also representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
Welcome. At-large city, City of Everett.
Good morning. It's Eric Molinari representing Mayor Carlo Di Maria in the City of Everett.
Good morning. At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning. David Kozis representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Morning. At-large town, Town of Arlington.
This is John Alessi representing Select Board Chair Steve DeCourcy and the Town of Arlington.
Hello. At-large town, Town of Brookline.
Good morning. Erin Jute representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the Town of Brookline.
Good morning. Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning. Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Ballantyne in the Inner Core.
Morning. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning. Kristen Guichard representing Acton Select Board Member Fran Arsenal for the Magic Region.
Morning. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giametti representing Metro West Region and Mayor Charles.
Thank you. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly. Next, North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. After that, South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull. And do we have Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham?
Rachel Benson, representing Chairman Botash for the Town of Rentham and Swamp.
Thank you. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the Town of Norwood, representing the Trick sub-region.
Good morning. Just circling back, North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
Thank you. Yes, Melissa Tentopoulos, North Suburban Planning Council.
Of course, and thank you. Federal Highway Administration.
Ken Miller, Federal Highway. Good morning.
Good morning. Federal Transit Administration. And just circling back, is there anyone else on the roll that I have not called?
North Shore Task Force, I just popped in. Darlene Wynn for the North Shore Task Force.
Thank you so much. With that, I will pass it back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one, so we'll go directly to the executive director's report. Take it.
Thank you, David. And hello, everyone. Go to the next slide, please. Maybe a slow next slide. There we go. I have a relatively short executive director's report today. I would like to just share with you one announcement and then give you a preview of today's agenda just for orientation and just chat about the next meeting dates. So next slide, please. While we're waiting for up, I'll say I am very pleased to announce that the MPO was just awarded the US DOT's Prioritization Process Pilot Program Grant Award, which we applied to back in May, and we talked about the application at the time. And the proposal is to review and update our funding criteria, both for our long-range transportation plan, the LRTP, as well as for our Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. And we want this update to be very, very grounded and rooted in our equity, safety, economic vitality, and climate resilience goals. And to support it, the scope that we submitted that was awarded includes a really comprehensive public engagement component that's going to help support the process being really transparent, responsive to public feedback, and also give an opportunity for really meaningful and accessible engagement into the development of these criteria. So our award for doing this work is approximately $1.5 million, and there is no local match required for this work. So we're very excited to get underway on this work, and we'll keep the board updated as we do so. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, again, I'll get started. There seems to be a bit of a delay. Next slide again, please. The first item on our agenda will be a discussion. Betsy Harvey will present to you and ask you to vote to release for the 30-day public comment period an update to the Disparate Impact and Disproportionate Burden, or DIDB policy. That policy was approved a few years ago, and the focus of this update is a description on how the MPO is going to be mitigating disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens that are found in the long-range plan, which is a 20-year horizon. How we'll mitigate those through funding projects in the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, which is our 5-year capital investment program. And the idea is that those mitigating projects would outweigh the impacts that were measured in the long-range plan. So Betsy will give us an update on that. And then the next action item will be TIP Amendment number 5, where Ethan Lapointe will ask you to vote to endorse, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words this morning, vote to release a new TIP Amendment 5 for a 21-day public comment period. This particular amendment primarily reallocates funding within the MWRTA's budget for new vehicle acquisitions. And then the next action item will be Ethan Lapointe again, also presenting on and asking you to vote to endorse an adjustment, which is a smaller administrative change that, according to our public engagement plan, does not warrant a public comment period. So similarly to Amendment 5, Adjustment 2 involves changes to the MWRTA's budget for revenue vehicle acquisition, but in this case on a small enough scale to require only an adjustment. And then next we will have a longer presentation from Mass DOT on updates to the Alston I-90 multimodal project, which will be followed by a discussion. And that will be the bulk of our, the largest agenda item we have today. And then finally, the strategies for environmental outreach and engagement will be a report by Stella Jordan, our public engagement program manager, on the results of the MPO's exploration of best practices for local preferences for environmental engagement. So she'll share our resulting recommendations for the MPO to incorporate environmental perspectives and priorities into our transportation planning process. Next slide. I think slowing down for me helped stumbling over words, but I know the slides are delayed. So while we wait for that to come up, the next meeting will be on, there you go, December 19th. And at that next meeting, we will be discussing the endorsement of the Destination 2050, the Long Range Plan Amendment 1, as well as TIP Amendment 4. We will also have updates on 2 major TIP funded projects, both McGrath and Rutherford. Those are also planned to occur on December 19th. So please have that on your schedule. We are, pardon the slight misleading language on the slide here, we are discussing canceling the January 2nd meeting, which is scheduled for 10 a.m. And we will confirm that with you when we'll send out an email confirmation to our contacts to let you know whether or not that is or is not the case. And then we will hold our next MPO meeting after that on January 16th at 10 a.m. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? If so, please raise your hand. I don't see any. Staff, is there any?
I'm also not seeing any.
All right. If during the meeting you want to, oh, Harry Madison, just under the wire, Harry.
Good morning. I'm a member of the MassDOT Alston Multimodal Project Task Force and see that that's on the agenda today. I guess, will there be opportunity for public comment after they make their presentation? Because members of the public have no idea what they're presenting, and so it's hard to make comments on a presentation that we don't know the contents of.
Yeah, so typically we take comments at the beginning and then we take comments from MPO members on the presentations and then open it up to comments from the public on the presentations. So there will most likely be an opportunity for people to comment after the presentation when the MPO is discussing the project.
Great, thank you. I'll look forward to commenting then.
No worries, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Oh, Jen Rowe.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a quick note that the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee is meeting after the MPO meeting on December 19th. And we'll be discussing kind of ongoing conversation around project readiness, as well as how we might think about approaching project delays anticipated, as in addition to cost increases. So stay tuned for an invite and agenda posted shortly.
Thank you. Any questions for Jen? Seeing none, are there any other committee chairs reports at this time? Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of October 24th. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name when making a motion. Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Barassa, making a motion to approve these meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Aaron Shute.
Shute, Town of Brookline, seconds.
Thank you. Comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Ken Miller, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, David. Just at the end where it shows the roster. Kirsty Hofstadter works for FTA, not Federal Highway.
Thank you, Ken. Any other questions or comments or suggestions or changes? Seeing none, with that correction, please call the roll.
Certainly. David Moeller.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Tarasi.
Tyler Tarasi abstain as we were not board members during this meeting.
Thank you. Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassi, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Switlikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tentopoulos,
Melissa Tentopoulos, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Anyone I have missed? With that, the motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I've got to step away. Eric, can you take over the chair duties for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Betsy.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Betsy Harvey Hertzfeld. I'm the Transportation Equity Program Manager for the Boston MPO, and I'm going to talk today, as Tegan mentioned, about the updates that staff have made to our the MPO's disparate impact and disproportionate burden policy, more commonly called the DIDB policy, and ask you to vote the policy to release for a 30-day public comment period. Next slide, please. And the next slide. So I want to give some background on the DIDB policy for those less familiar with it, or since it's been a while since it's come before the board. The policy was adopted by the MPO in November 2020 to allow us to determine if minority or low-income populations would be disproportionately impacted by projects listed in the long-range transportation plan. In that analysis, projects are analyzed as a collective whole and not individually, and impacts are analyzed for the population for the entire MPO region. When we conduct the DIDB analysis, we look at a variety of different transportation impacts, things like travel time and air quality, access to destinations, to determine if minority or low-income populations would be disproportionately impacted. Next slide. So identifying these impacts are required by federal civil rights regulations. And by having this DIDB policy, it allows the MPO to comply with these regulations in a consistent and transparent way, as well as to advance the MPO's goal of a more equitable transportation system in the Boston region. For the purposes of this policy, we consider a disparate impact to be one that disproportionately affects minority population, and disproportionate burden, one that disproportionately affects the low-income population. They are somewhat interchangeable, and so for ease of discussion, I'll just refer to them as disparate impacts. Next slide. So the updates we made to this policy were several, and I want to highlight them. The policy is posted on the MPO meeting calendar, and it's marked up with comments, so you can see what sort of revisions were made and where. We added a new section that describes the MPO's approach to mitigating disparate impacts, which I will discuss in more detail in just a few minutes. We made revisions to reflect changes to MPO processes and practices since the policy was last adopted. We edited and reorganized some content to improve clarity, and we expanded the analysis to include people with limited English proficiency, and as well as minority and low-income populations, since this population is also covered by federal civil rights regulations. Next slide. So the federal civil rights regulations that I referred to do require MPOs not to only identify disparate impacts, which this policy helps us do, but also to mitigate them. And so I want to talk through a proposed mitigation process that is the most substantial change to the policy and may affect programming decisions down the road in the Transportation Improvement Program. The best way for the MPO to mitigate impacts of the projects that are in the LRTP is to fund projects in the Transportation Improvement Program that provide benefits that outweigh those disparate impacts. So we would look at impacts of all the projects in the TIP, That is the region-wide impacts of all the people living in the MPO region, and determine if their benefits would outweigh the negative impacts found in the long-range transportation plan. You may remember that this past spring, as staff were developing that TIP, we analyzed projects that the MPO chose to fund to see if they would mitigate disparate impacts that we had found in the LRTP. This was kind of a pilot year. We wanted to find out if our methodology would work and could be replicated each year. And so what we learned from that process last year kind of was incorporated in this update to the DID policy and reflected in that section about how we would like to mitigate disparate impacts. So for an LRTP for which there are disparate impacts, mitigation would take place through those 4 years of 4 TIPs that immediately follow. In other words, the TIPs that are completed in the 4 years in which an LRTP is active. If the cumulative impact of those TIPs would provide a greater benefit than the disparate impact, that impact would be considered mitigated. If they don't, we would address them again in the next LRTP cycle. So this may be a little abstract in the moment, so I'm going to, in the next slide, talk about an example, hypothetical example of how this could work. So next slide, please. So let's say that the low-income population would gain access to, on average, 100 jobs. This is, again, hypothetical, not a real life example. And the non-low-income population would get access to 200 more jobs due to the projects in the LRTP. So that's the top row in gray. Over the following 4 TIPs, the low-income population would need to gain at least 100 jobs to mitigate that difference, that disparity of 100 jobs. So in this example, in some TIPs, they'd get more access to jobs. In some cases, they'd get access to fewer jobs than the non-low-income population. But what we're looking at is the change over the course of all 4 TIPs. And overall, the low-income population would gain access to more than the 100 we need to mitigate. And so we would consider mitigation successful in this case. So it's the issue of adding up, the impact over the course of 4 TIPs and adding those up at the end of the 4 years. Next slide. So I want to show kind of on a timeline, on a temporal scale, to show how the process would play out for the 2023 LRTP, because we did find several disparate impacts of disproportionate burdens that we do need to address, and that kind of spurred us to create this process. We completed the LRTP in July of 2023, so Destination 2050. And so we started the mitigation process the following year, so this past year, with the development of the 2025 TIP. We will do the same mitigation analysis for 3 more TIPs. So this year's upcoming TIP, the 2026 TIP, and then 27 and 28. After the 2028 TIP, we would analyze the cumulative impacts of the projects funded across all 4 of those TIPs to determine if those disparate impacts were mitigated. Any that are not will be carried over to the next LRTP cycle, and we would continue to address them as part of that next LRTP's mitigation process. Next slide. So what does this mean for TIP project program, you may be wondering? How do we know if we're funding projects that mitigate disparate impacts? We can use project scores for criteria that relate to those impacts. So, for example, wrapping up a study called Using Conveil in TIP project scoring, we're proposing new evaluation criteria that would quantify how projects might change people's ability to access destinations. Access to destinations was one of the disparate impacts that we found in the 2023 LRTP. We found disparities in access to healthcare by transit, access to jobs by transit, access to parks and open space by driving, average travel time by driving, and average travel time by transit. With new evaluation criteria that look specifically at destination access, we'll be able to better identify which projects are likely to help us mitigate those disparities. I will be presenting the results of that study in a later MPO meeting, so keep that in mind, and we can discuss those in more detail at that time. As we develop the TIP this year and upcoming years and present project scores, we will indicate which projects do score well in these areas to help give you a better idea of how different projects could help mitigate those disparate impacts. Next slide. So that wraps up my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions you have and then ask for you to vote to release the policy for a 30-day public comment period, which would start on December 9th and end on January 8th. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Betsy. Any questions? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions, just to express my pleasure, with what you've done. I'm looking forward to making the motion to approve its release, and I really do appreciate the work that the MPO does. On DBDI, we really take the work seriously. I was involved in the development of the plan back 6 years ago or whatever, and so yeah, it's good to see the improvements that you are making for this next cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Lynn, do you want to make a motion to release the DIDB policy for a 30-day public comment period?
You said it so well, so I'll just say as moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Please state your name for the record. Jen Rowe.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard, John Bouchard. Next is John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Terasi,
Tyler Terasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Anna Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes. And thank you for all your work on this.
you, Len Diggins,
Thank you, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent, once again,
Sorry,
Tom Bent.
sorry, I couldn't unmute. Yes, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Zoom buttons are located in weird spots nowadays. Next is Kristen Guichard. Dennis Giambetti.
Yes.
Sorry.
Also Kristen
Sorry,
Guichard
yes,
saying
I
yes.
apologize.
Sorry about that, and acknowledging both votes. Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tentopoulos,
Melissa Tentopoulos, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
With that, this motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Betsy, very much. Oh, John Bouchard, do you want to vote on that last motion?
I had stepped away from my computer for a second and then I couldn't unmute. So yes, I vote in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Federal Fiscal Year 25 to 29, tip amendment number 5, Ethan Lapointe.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. My first presentation here today is to present Amendment 5 to the Federal Fiscal Years 2025 to 29 tip and release it for a 21-day comment period. If we can go on to the next slide. And the one after that. Amendment 5 includes some slight reallocations of funding from some infrastructure purchases that the Metro West Regional Transit Authority is pursuing, specifically for revenue vehicle acquisitions. We'll also note that some of the changes that are being incorporated in this amendment, which would include a 21-day comment period, are also being complemented by the subsequent line item, or the subsequent action item, which is tip adjustment 2, which would be endorsed. This is because while the changes are similar to each other, the items in adjustment 2 are smaller scale to those that are included here, which reach the threshold of an amendment. Specifically, to talk about those items on the next slide, again, there's two items here, both for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. The first being for a federal Section 5307 funded 2025 electric vehicle additional electrification infrastructure cost project. This project is currently budgeted for $500,000 in the federal fiscal year 2025 transit program, but is proposed for removal from the TIP to instead fund the acquisition of some revenue vehicles in the quantity of 5 different Type D vehicles for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, which has a total budget, in this case, of $802,510. Because this is the removal of a project and the other one is the introduction of a new project, these are both classified as items that would be incorporated into an amendment versus what we will get to later. If we can go on to the next slide. Again, as an amendment, the MPO staff requests that the board would vote to release Amendment 5 for a 21-day comment period, which would commence tomorrow, Friday, December 6th, and conclude on December 27th at 5 p.m. Happy to field any questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to release this amendment for a 21-day public review process? And please state your name for the record. Tyler?
Yes, Tyler Tarasi, make a motion to approve this Amendment 5 for a public comment period, 21 day.
Thank you. Is there a second? Tom Bent?
Mr. Chair, I will second that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Yes. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tentaklis,
Melissa Tentaklis, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
This motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is action item FFY tip adjustment number 2, Ethan Lapointe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. If we can go on to the next slide. So adjustment 2 to the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip, and if we can go on next slide as well, please, is complementary to Amendment 5, which was just presented. In this case, it involves 2 fairly slight cost increases, or I should say 1 cost increase and 1 cost decrease for 2 Metro West Regional Transit Authority projects in federal fiscal year 2025. Again, these line items are very similar to what was just presented in Amendment 5, but they were small enough to accommodate an adjustment, which does not include a public comment period, to ensure that these projects could be endorsed at the end of the calendar year to go out with the next STIP action. Go on the next slide. Specifically, these 2 items, in similar spirit to the other actions being taken for revenue vehicle procurement, are a slight reduction in the overall cost of technology support and capital outreach activities by the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. In this case, a reduction from $300,000 to $274,000, net change of $25,909. in order to adjust the proportion of matching funds that MWRTA is allocating to that effort, and an increase on the vehicle replacement line item for further revenue cutaways. This is a different line item to that type D item in Amendment 5. In this case, increasing from $800,000 to $929,544, a $129,544 increase, in order to reflect anticipated costs for revenue vehicle acquisition in federal fiscal year 2025. It's worth noting, especially in the case of this revenue cutaway line, that this is also funded across multiple years of the TIP. This change only affects federal fiscal year 2025. The subsequent years of this line item from 2026 through to 2029 are unchanged as far as their anticipated budgets there. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide. MPO staff are requesting that the board votes to endorse adjustment 2.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions for Ethan? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve adjustment 2 as presented today? Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I make a motion to approve adjustment 2.
Is there a second? Tyler?
Tyler Tarasi will second this motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Certainly. David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski,
Hannah Switlikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Chute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Melissa Tantakis,
Melissa Tantakis, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a project overview and updates on the Alston Multimodal Project. I believe Susan Harrington is here. Are you here, Susan?
Yes, sorry about that. Good morning,
No
everyone.
worries.
Susan, hi. Susan Harrington, Mass DOT, Major Projects, Design Build Project Manager, representing the Alston Multimodal Project this morning. So I believe you have the presentation, or should I take over the screen?
Please take over the screen and thank you.
Please take over the
Let us know
screen,
if you have any
Susan.
challenges.
Excuse the pause. I'd like to get this into slideshow mode.
Are we having trouble giving Susan control of the screen? There we go. There we go.
Right,
Thank
Coming
you.
up now,
just-
David.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Um, is what you can see just
We have the cover
front
slide.
page?
We have the
Okay.
cover slide.
Okay, so I also have the controls. The controls is what I'm seeing. So thank you for your patience.
No worries.
Again, this is the Mass DOT Major Projects Alston Multimodal Project. So first, for the agenda, I'll be doing a quick project overview for some of us that might not be as familiar with the project, some quick project design updates, starting with the West Station and rail layout, shoreline and parkland, multimodal local connections, multimodal local street network, and move into a project status update and take some questions from there. So first, we'll start with the project locus map for the overview. What you're looking at on the screen is at the center of the circle is the project locus in the Alston neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. From left to right across the screen to orient you is the Charles River, opening up into the Boston Harbor on the right. You can see the Back Bay street grid. The cyan or blue line moving across the screen is Interstate 90. The magenta line you see is the Worcester Main Line, and right at the center of the circle, you'll see our project site. To the north of the river is Cambridge. To the south of the project site is Brookline and Boston University. Just to the west or northwest of the project site is the Harvard Northeastern Enterprise Campus. To the west is the Alston Brighton neighborhood, Belmont, Newton, Watertown, and right in just to the south of the project is Brookline. This project shows Alston today and what Alston will look like with this project. So hatched in this brick color is the existing I-90 layout and interchange system, including the elevated viaduct. You can see the looped ramps bordered to the northwest by Cambridge Street. And to the east, you can see that, can you see my cursor if I move it across the screen?
Yes, it's kind of tough to see, Susan, but it's coming up. Just hard to you might want to orient the audience as you're which graphic you're showing.
Okay. I'll try to refrain from the mouse. So in the image on the right side of the screen, you can see that the Interstate 90 is flattened out quite a bit within the rail yard. The elevated viaduct structure and looped ramp system is removed. And what you see here is a new street grid bordered to the northwest by Cambridge Street, to the east by the Charles River. And just to the south of I-90, you see a new West Station. That's a new MBTA West Station, and the Worcester Main Line across the south of the screen. Again, to the northwest, you see Lower Alston, a new Harvard Enterprise Research Campus. To the south of the project is Boston University. So a quick project overview. The interchange is critical to the Commonwealth's roadway network, and improvement to the project will ensure its efficient operations. These improvements include improved livability and connectivity and open space for residents of Alston, improve regional mobility and roadway safety. So with the straightening of I-90, the project will also shrink the Alston interchange. Replacing the aging Alston viaduct decreases the need for maintenance. Removing the structure will advance an all-at-grade alternative to allow for improved gateway into the city and enhanced neighborhood views. Significant transit enhancements, a new West Station, providing regional mobility, providing greater access and improvements to the commuter rail and local bus service, improved livability and connectivity with creation of a new multimodal local City of Boston street network, and complete streets enhancements along Cambridge Street. Also, this creates new DCR parkland along the Charles River. It opens up about 5 or 6 acres through a realignment of Soldiers Field Road and improved access to existing parks in the area, along with added infrastructure to handle stormwater and lower emissions. Also, the major part of this project as a multimodal project, enhanced bicycle and pedestrian connections from both the Alston neighborhood, Aganis Way, the Boston University campus to connect with new open space along the Charles River. So this you can see is here is a pretty typical diagram. It's one that recently went out to indicate some rail alignment modifications. This diagram specifically shows one of 3 interchange options currently being evaluated in the interchange modification report. This here shown is the 3L modified realignment option, but each of these 3 alternatives will be given equal evaluation within that IMR. This section of the project is what we commonly refer to as the throat area. What you see here in the top image is looking west along I-90 towards Beacon Park Yards. To the west of the image is the Boston University campus. To the east is the Charles River. And what you see here is that elevated I-90 viaduct structure. The alternative that this project is currently advancing and was also, I'd like to point out, shaped through a public participation process. What you see here is an all at-grade version that takes this I-90 elevated structure down to at grade, moving from left to right across the screen. What you see here is a Paul Dudley White pathway on an elevated structure in the Charles. The reason this cross-section was shown for the purpose of this presentation is to just stay consistent with the last MEPA environmental filing, the last NPC in 2022 that was filed. And what we'll see in a few slides is some modifications that have been made to that option. And then again, moving left to east, you see two lanes of Soldiers Field Road in each direction, 4 lanes of I-90 in each direction, 2 tracks for Grand Junction, and 2 tracks for the Worcester Main Line. And again, this is called the throat area of the project as it's our most constrained area on the project. At its most constrained point, it's just about a little under 205 feet wide, fitting all of these pieces of infrastructure in there. So some quick design updates. These are some rail alignment updates that most recently have been presented. What this shows here is a 2-platform configuration in the last environmental filing and in the US DOT grant application. What we saw was 3 platforms. This shows 2. Not a departure from what was shown, where we are again showing 8 layover spaces, room for 8 layover spaces, 2 Grand Junction tracks, 2 Worcester Main Line siding tracks, and 2 Worcester Main Line express bypass tracks. In the previous filing, I believe that there was 1 express bypass track shown. And another change from what we had shown previously was there was a much slimmer south side buffer path. That's that multimodal buffer path that you see along the south side of the rail alignments. What we now show is a minimum of 30-foot wide multimodal buffer path. This next image is the same image with the bus concourse. This is a decked bus concourse above those platforms. You can still see the pink platforms below and the rail alignment. And this roadway to the left is the Cambridge Street bypass roadway. This is a new elevated roadway that will be connected to the Cambridge Street Bridge, coming right down into West Station at the same elevation as the bus concourse. This next image here, again, as I pointed out in the cross section, what we were showing is the NPC shoreline alternative, which is an elevated boardwalk structure in the Charles. This was originally implemented with this at-grade alternative to accommodate Soldiers Field Road, I-90, the Worcester Main Line, and the Grand Junction tracks, while minimizing fill in the Charles. So this boardwalk structure was introduced. What we have now, also shaped through public participation and a Mass DOT working group process, is this on-grade separated path with the shoreline. It integrates the Paul Dudley White path with the shoreline. It maintains Soldiers Field Road Historic Parkway experience, improves DCR maintenance, DCR's maintenance preferences. So it's about 1,500 linear feet in length. It does accommodate less than 1 acre of fill in compliance with the Army Corps General Permit for Linear Transportation Project. It provides for separated multimodal accessibility, and it incorporates a shoreline with native plantings to provide ecological benefit. So even this alternative here went through a series of different options. This is most similar to what we will be showing in the SDEIR DEIS filings that we have coming up, showing grade separated pedestrian and bike pathways. Other elements that the project team is continuing to advance for local connectivity are the Franklin Street pedestrian bridge that connects with Lincoln Street in Alston to the Cambridge Street side of I-90 and the Worcester Main Line. That's an existing bridge that connects in with the Cambridge Street Bridge that will be replaced as part of this project and made so that it is accessible. And I'd also like to add here that the Cambridge Street Bridge, that it is coming towards, either connecting with or in the vicinity of, is something that was added through a public participation process of this project, where the desire was to fully replace the Cambridge Street Bridge versus rehabilitate it in its current state, which is not currently accessible. So another multimodal local connection that we're looking at is the South Side Buffer Path. The intention is to connect this in the vicinity of that Franklin Street connection along the south side of the tracks and all the way to connect in through West Station and to the Guinness Pedestrian Bridge, which will connect the Boston University campus at Harry Guinness Way across to that newly created parkland. Things that we're working on for the multimodal local street network design. So Mass DOT engaged CTPS to conduct traffic modeling. These future land use assumptions that go into this CTPS model were provided by Mass DOT in coordination with MAPC, MBTA, the City of Boston, and Harvard University. So what we do see coming out of these CTPS results, we're in coordination with our stakeholders in terms of what assumptions went into this process. And what we're looking at is a 2050 future build year consistent with the MPO's long-term long-range transportation plan. So what the team is working on currently is the model results post-processing. We're evaluating those three interchange options that I spoke of, the 3L, 3L mod, and the 3 bridge, and evaluating those as they interact with the interchange and the street network design. Our major operational goal in looking at those results is to provide for, and this is a goal, to provide for no queuing on I-90 with a safe transition into the new street network. We're working very closely and will continue to work very closely with the City of Boston on a minimalistic approach to the roadway cross section. And that would be to look at signaling, left turning lanes, dedicated bus lanes, things of that nature. And most importantly, safety being the name of the game here in designing these new local streets is to have them be accessible and separated safe modes of travel. And it looks like a rendering may not have come through. Let me see. Okay, so I'm just going to move along to the status updates for the project. The project cost, the total project cost is currently estimated at $2.07 billion. This includes reconstruction of the Cambridge Street Bridge over I-90 MBTA Railroad. We did receive, the announcement was made that we were in receipt of, or have been awarded $335 million in discretionary VANT funding for Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods grant. So Mass DOT was the lead applicant. We filed jointly with the City of Boston for this. We also have financial commitment from Mass DOT, City of Boston, Harvard and Boston University. The obligation deadline that comes along with this award is September of 2026, which means that we need to clear NEPA at that point to obligate the funds. Most recently, and the impetus for this presentation is that we asked for a Boston MPO to approve a TIP amendment for an obligation of $10.2 million of those funds towards a base phase for the design and utilities for the Cambridge Street Bridge replacement. Here we have project status, project timeline. So spring of 2025, we'll be looking at filing that interchange modification report with Federal Highway for approval. Currently, we're working through the winter of 2024 through the fall of 2025 for the review and approval of supplemental draft environmental impact report, the SEIR, and the draft environmental impact statement, the DEIS. So that's a joint NEPA-MEPA filing that we're pursuing. Then from that point, from the winter of 2025 to the fall of 26, we're looking at review and approval of the environmental impact report and final environmental impact statement. September of 2026, which again is that obligation date, we're looking for a design build request for qualifications. And in the fall of 2027 would be where we're projecting the design build contractor notice to proceed. This is something that we are currently looking at, ways to obligate these funds and continue advancing this project. So what we've discussed with Federal Highway is a potential approach to advance an early phase of the project construction, potentially including these following elements that were listed here. Before I go through the list, I do just want to point out these stars at the bottom that this phased concept approach is contingent upon Federal Highway approval. It is not something that we have approval for at this point. It is an attempt to, have these funds that we've been awarded being spent appropriately, matching the intent of the grant funding that was awarded. So kind of meeting that criteria, that merit criteria for the grant that was awarded. So that would include early utility relocations and earthwork, reconstruction of the Cambridge Street Bridge, reconstruction and realignment of the Franklin Street pedestrian bridge, reconstruction of the Lincoln Street switchback ramp connection to Cambridge Street. That's something that can't necessarily be seen on this image to the left. If you can see my cursor, it's just about here. It's a switchback that connects Lincoln Street up to the Cambridge Street Bridge currently. It is not accessible as far as the grades go. So that would need to be reconstructed as part of this. Construction of a new Lincoln Street noise barrier, modifications to associated rail and highway alignments and grading. As I mentioned earlier, the grades on Cambridge Street do exceed ADA and would require some modifications to the rail lines and to the highway to provide appropriate clearances that are required for a newly constructed bridge. So again, this phase concept and elements of work contingent upon FHWA approval. I do see we have Federal Highway on this call. So no misconception there. And this concept will continue to be communicated publicly. And I believe that is all I have for this presentation. And Dave Moeller or any other individuals on the call, please fill in any blanks that were intended for this update.
So are there questions for Susan before we talk about other issues around the project? Any questions or comments or concerns? Eric Barassa. And Harry, I see your hand up. I'll get you after I get to MPO members.
Susan, thank you for this this overview. Could you talk a little bit about the project cost and where the various funds are coming for the 2.07 billion?
Susan, is this something you want me to talk about, or do you want to handle it?
Sure. If you'd be willing to talk about it.
Yeah. So there is a commitment, a letter commitment in a letter from City of Boston to provide $100 million. There's a commitment from Harvard University to provide $90 million. There's a commitment from BU to provide $10 million. There is then a joint commitment letter from the city and, well, actually it's two separate letters, but talking about the same issue, about providing an additional $100 million from tax revenue from development. And then there is the $335 million discretionary grant. And the rest will have to be made up from Commonwealth sources, but we have not yet developed a finance plan. There is a finance plan in the application, but it is just a pie chart, and we have not yet developed a full committed finance plan.
Okay, so the remainder is basically Commonwealth sources, but that's still being worked on.
Yeah, the application envisions the sources being toll revenue, fair share revenue, TIFIA loan. For those of you who don't know what TIFIA is, it is a loan program administered by the federal government where they give loans for transportation projects. I think that's the primary sources, but again, all of that is subject to changes in what has happened since the application submission. But yes, we are about to begin again a process of trying to develop a finance plan that we can then release with either the DEIS or the FEIS as required.
Thank you. And then can I ask another one?
Of course.
You know, one thing that, you know, we're concerned about is just the impacts on the MBTA's ability to access maintenance and be able to run, you know, robust commuter rail service during the sort of long life of the project. Have those issues, I know those issues are being worked on. Has that advanced? Is there more understanding of sort of the impacts on the MBTA and how that will be mitigated?
So I think what you're probably, and Susan, if you want to ever jump in and just talk over me, feel free. I think what you're probably referring to is the closure of the Grand Junction Bridge.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, the Grand Junction Bridge is going to be out of service during the construction of Alston. The Grand Junction Bridge is the primary means by which South Side commuter rail trains get to Beacon BET on the north side, which BET is Boston Engine Terminal. It is the primary and possibly really only heavy maintenance yard T owns for commuter rail maintenance. When we close the Grand Junction, we will need to figure out a process by which either those trains can get to BET or those trains can be maintained somewhere on the south side. We know that's an issue. We are working on it. You know, we don't have anything to report today, but it is, yes, we will not we will not close the Grand Junction without solving this issue.
Thank you.
Is that it for you, Eric?
Yes.
Okay. Aaron, shoot.
Thank you very much. So, understanding that the financing package is still being worked on, could you just provide an outline on the big picture timeline for the project and the sort of the timeline for the final design and how these early action projects fit in?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to let Susan talk about the timeline for the project. Susan, can you talk about just in general, like the construction timeline and I think you already said that we had to have our NEPA by September of 2026, which would also be our MEPA clearance. And then can you talk briefly about the planned timeline for the construction project?
Yep, sure. So for the greater project, we wouldn't plan to depart and aren't currently planning to depart from the timeline that was shown on the screen. So that would mean a design build NTP at the end of 2027 with early construction activities starting at that time while the final design progresses, this being design build. So this goes out at about a 25% design level and is then taken by the design builder through 75, 100%. And issued for construction plans. And one of the benefits with design build is that you can begin those early activities, early construction activities, earthwork, steel fabrication, things of that nature. So we really get into some heavier construction later in 2028, but you'd see those early activities at the end of 2027, early 2028. And as far as the early activities go, what we would be trying to pursue is clearing those elements, an earlier phase of that larger multimodal project. Again, not taking this out as its own independent project, but considering it as an early phase of the greater project. We'd be looking to clear NEPA really as soon as possible. It's one of the things that we're evaluating, you know, A, if this is possible, separating out these elements, and B, what that timeline looks like.
And just to cap that,
yep.
How long do you anticipate the full project to take?
The construction schedule currently sits at about 8 years out from start of heavy construction.
So
Thank you, Aaron. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. So the phased approach, you're waiting for Fed approval on that, right?
Yes.
So what's the alternative to phased approach?
The alternative is we will continue the project as a single project and will not be able to obligate any of the funding until September of 2026.
I imagine, a non-phased approach is more costly.
I don't think the phased approach.
That the non-phased approach will cost more.
Susan, is there a cost differential between the phased and non-phased, or is this just about schedule and trying to show for movement and giving the community's been waiting over a decade for some real progress? Susan, is this about like cost, or is this about schedule and obligating funds?
Right. Most simply, it's not about increasing the cost of the project. It's about scheduling these elements and obligating these funds that we've been awarded towards elements of the project appropriate for this grant funding. And it's really a scheduling.
Yeah, I was hoping that the phase approach would lower the cost because you could start work sooner rather than later, but apparently not, and that's okay. That wipes out other questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Dennis Giambetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions, one for Susan and one for you, if I could.
Sure.
Susan, I know you're showing the layover facility now on site of this project. I know there's some discussions of having that layover facility in another location, and it now is back into this design. Can you talk a little bit about what the impact of having a layover facility is there, as opposed to not having it there?
So I think I will take this question. I think I will take this question, possibly helped by my friends at the MBTA if need be. So the layover at Beacon Park Yards was first identified in the South Station DEIS as a necessary layover facility in addition to Woodette and Reedville. Throughout the development of this project, the layover facility has been part of this project up until, well, it's still part of this project. Without the layover facility, it will be that layover facility will have to be relocated somewhere else at a cost, and it will be somewhere else in the city of Boston. It's also true that without that layover facility, it makes it much harder and certainly in the short term more expensive for West-East Rail to be implemented over time. Lindsay, do you have your hand up? You're going to help me?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Lindsay Heffernan, Chief of Policy and Strategic Planning from the T. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chair. I would add, in addition, Mr. Giambetti as well, while West-East Rail, and in particular their need for a location for trains is a clear importance for the community. And when I think about this project's long history, was never sort of part of our early design, yet that project is now advancing full steam ahead. In addition, for the MBTA, the Worcester Main Line and providing additional service on that line is a key priority of ours. We're looking to move to 30-minute train service there on that line within the next year or so. We are very constrained in terms of layover in our current system. I would say we're bursting at the seams. Long term, the hope is certainly that Wydette will alleviate many of those concerns, yet it is not immediately available. And as we bring South Coast Rail on to the MBTA system, we will become more constrained. And so that layover need, when we look at the totality of needs across the region, continues to be an important piece for both intercity rail, our Amtrak providers, and our future MBTA potential needs. But we continue to look at that issue. So thank you for asking.
Great. Just having the layover facility at Beacon Yard site, does it impact the throat area at all?
I don't think it's a third area issue, Susan.
Okay.
Susan, shaking your head no.
No.
Okay, good. Okay. The other question I have is you mentioned tolls as far as funding sources. Could you elaborate on what that alludes to?
Yeah, and again, the tolls is one of the sources in the finance plan that was submitted as part of the application.
Yeah.
And when I say it's a finance plan, it is a pie chart. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe, and this is from memory, Dennis, but I believe the toll contribution over the time, the lifetime of the project was, I think, $200 million, which would roughly be $20 million a year over 10 years. It would come from existing toll revenue. There is no plan to increase the tolls on the turnpike. There's
That was
no
my real
plan,
question.
and there's no plan to bond the toll revenues on the turnpike. This would be pay-as-you-go funding that would be accommodated through MassDOT's CIP.
Okay, great. Okay, super. As you well know, Metro West is a very sensitive issue, so thank you.
Absolutely, and it is sensitive for us too, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. David Kozis.
Thank you, David. I just missed one thing that Lindsay just said. Could you just repeat what you said about moving in the next year, something about changing along the Worcester line? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. What I was referring to is the MBTA has been investing quite significantly in the Worcester Main Line to ultimately increase service frequency and reliability along the line. We hope to get to 30-minute train frequency out the Worcester line. I want to say it's in early 2026, but I will double check that figure, that date, and make sure to loop back with this team if I'm wrong. And so that involves infrastructure investments along the course of the line that we have been doing, some of which were funded by fiscal year 24 fair share dollars. And so the importance of the Worcester Main Line was really what I was suggesting. So we have to invest in the line, invest in layover, invest in maintenance, all of the various pieces. And so wanted this to be responsive to the questions from Metro West. We appreciate the need for rail service and are trying to do our best to deliver what they are asking for through this process.
Tom Bent.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Not sure if this question's for you or Susan. It's more,
We'll figure it out.
One of the big questions that we get all the time is, when is this going to start and when's it going to finish? So if I did my math right, it sounds like it'll be completed around 2035. Is that what you're shooting for? 100% completion.
Susan?
That's what the schedule currently shows for substantial completion.
Okay, so I did my math right. Thank you.
Any other questions from MPO members before I take comments from the public? Seeing none, Harry Madison.
Thank you, David. So the proposal we saw today doubles the number of bypass tracks going through Alston, and I was wondering if you'll release your analysis of why that change was made.
So the DEIR, SDEIR, DEIS will be released in, I think, the fall, Susan? Fall of this year? Is that true?
Of 2025.
Okay, fall of 2025. Yeah, I guess, yeah, not 2024. Fall of 2025. That will have a full explanation of the reasoning behind that, as well as the implications of that decision, so that then the public can have a chance to comment through the MEPA and NEPA process about whether that decision is appropriate.
So why are we waiting 9 or 10 months to see that?
Because, well, it's because at some point we have to, I'm not sure, Harry, what you're asking for.
I mean, you've already done the analysis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so can you just email, can you email it to me after the meeting's over?
Well, we haven't, so an analysis is, it depends what you mean by an analysis, Harry. We know why we need those express tracks. We can easily have this discussion, probably not today, but we can have this discussion. We can send you things, not you, but we can make things available. But it's not the same as an analysis that you will see in the DEIR, DEIS. Okay, it's not that level of analysis. It is more of a, the MBTA, MassDOT, and the the MBTA, MassDOT, Rail and Transit, and Amtrak have all come to the conclusion that we need layover space and express tracks as defined in the presentation today. And yes,
Right, and so that was based on some numbers and some math and some analysis of like, hey, here's how many trains can be stored at Wadeth. Here's how often East Coast, East-West Rail is going to be running X number of trains per hour. Someone did some, what I'll call analysis to reach certain conclusions, right?
well, so Harry, I would,
Or
for
did
the
you just,
for the analysis of layover, I would point you back to South Station, which
that's
had
10 years old.
Yes, and commuter rail needs have gotten only bigger, not less.
No, but
Right?
commuter rail service goals have changed dramatically since then with ideas like regional rail and shifting from a morning and peak rush schedule to a all-day schedule. So
right,
to say that the world hasn't changed in 10 years is
right. But
but
Harry,
that was the city didn't even,
but Harry, that requires more trains, not less, and more layover space, not less. It may not be midday layover space, but there will be an expansion of the commuter rail fleet in order to do the regional rail proposal that we all want to get to. That requires additional layover, not less. What has changed over 10 years is we have increased our commitment to commuter rail, and we have increased our commitment or made our commitment to East-West Rail, all of which means that you need additional, at least the layover space that South Station said, and possibly more.
so is there any analysis that you're going to release before the fall of 2025?
Harry, I don't know. I will find out.
Great. When would be the right time to check back with you on that?
I would say to Harry, check, if you haven't heard from me, well, if something has, if the answer is we have analysis that we can release, it will be released next, it will be released to the task force, not just to you. It'll be released to the task force, and it'll be released hopefully by the end of the week. If you haven't heard anything by the end of the week, check back with me.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no worries. I'll give you a yes or no answer, Harry. I'm not trying to hide anything. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Great. And then just the follow-up question is, will MassDOT be restarting the working groups that got suspended this fall?
Susan, I think the answer is yes. You're shaking your head, yes? Yes, the answer is yes, Harry.
Yes,
Great.
we'll be restarting the working groups and scheduling a task force meeting.
Are there any dates set for any of that?
We don't have a schedule, but we should have something by the end of the year.
You'll have a schedule sent out by the end of the year?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, so I do see members of the public with their hands up, but I'm going to go back to members. Brian Kane.
Thank you, David. Much obliged.
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here, Brian.
Well, you're very kind, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Very kind. I think this is a great sort of concept. Keeping access for express rail from the west is critical. Obviously, whatever happens with East-West Rail, there will be additional service to Worcester that's going to have to get through this area. Worcester being the second largest city in New England, obviously connecting it to Boston is critical. I understand that there are concerns, but I also think that the plan to keep access to the commuter rail maintenance facility is critical. There needs to be more layover, not less, even if there is a regional rail. Despite what lots of people say, trains cannot run 24/7, 365. They have to have places to stop and be serviced and be cleaned and have crew changeover. There is no such thing as running trains 24 hours a day in the United States. It's not going to happen. And we do need places for them to go, even when they're not operating at peak capacity. So I think this is a great concept, and I look forward to seeing it advance. And we fully support it right now, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Jay Flynn. Can someone unmute Jay, please? Steph, is this on our end or Jay's end?
I
David,
requested for him to unmute himself, but he hasn't done so.
Oh, there he goes.
Yeah, I'm trying. I show unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you are unmuted now, Jay. We can hear you.
Okay, great. More of a comment than a question, but between Wydette and what will end up remaining at Reedville after the maintenance facility that's proposed would be, I believe off the top of my head, 42 storage spots. And I was told there'd be no math. I'm a history major, but I think it's 42. I believe it's 26 or 27 for Wydette and approximately 18 at Reedville. The most sanguine estimates of how many train sets are going to be required, because while they won't operate all day, trains will tend to operate more often other than maintenance and fuel needs. The biggest number I've seen is about 55 to 57 train sets. And that's with a fairly aggressive schedule. But, and you say, oh, 57 is lower than 42, but there are storage areas at the other ends. If you're talking about overnight storage, one would assume that of that fleet, and I understand there are extra trains around, but let's say there's 75 train sets in all. That means 37 of them should be out in the burbs. And I know in a couple of cases, Worcester has a shortage there. Well, it should be addressed there. And I speak as a Worcesterite, so I'm not trying to dump diesel trains anywhere else. And so, at Transit Matters, we don't see the need for this amount of extra storage. There is a certain operational benefit to having them on the Worcester line as far as moving trains through the throat of the station. However, not so much as to incur this expense. And we've identified several other possible places for storage in the Boston area that are tracked right now. So, the notion that the 2013, I believe it was, study is still accurate, we strongly disagree with that. And one actual question, does that estimate of the project cost include the maintenance facility on South Side?
No, that is not a part of the Alston costs.
Okay, so that would be an additional, estimates are like $500 million on top of the other costs. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can't, 500 million is your estimate, not mine, but yes, it will be an additional cost.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Jay. Other questions? So Christian, I see you have your hand up, but you're also a reporter, and I'm not sure whether your hand up is as a member of the public or as a reporter. If it's as a reporter, you should contact, Amelia or someone else in comms, and we will get you a response to whatever questions you have.
Well,
but if it's as a member of the public.
Yeah, let me ask
Christian,
a question as a member of the public.
Okay.
I'm just curious about the financing plan, because you cited a $2 billion project cost. And that's roughly the same project cost that Mass DOT had back in May 2022 when it submitted its federal grant application. But the Federal Highway Administration's construction cost index for construction cost inflation has increased roughly 25% in the past 2 years. And the project scope has also changed. Like, you've added in the new Cambridge Street Bridge replacement. That's an additional cost. So I'm just wondering, where's the consideration for projects cost inflation?
Oh, absolutely, Jay. You get one. Somebody mute.
I'll go too.
Hey, if you're not muted, please mute. Thank you. So Christian, I can answer part of that question, I think. So the project cost has actually increased to reflect the addition of the Cambridge Street Bridge project, which, as Susan mentioned, came about in response to public comments from the neighborhood and the affected local government. We have, since after the submission of the grant application, we have included Cambridge Street in the project. The project costs have increased show that inclusion. I'm actually not the person who can speak to whether our costs reflect federal highways costs, or whether it's even appropriate to look at some federal highway national number as opposed to the Boston numbers. That is how we do our cost estimates based on weighted average bid prices that we track on a, I don't know, I think a bi-weekly, if not weekly basis.
So there hasn't been any adjustment for inflation since 2022. It sounds like is the answer. Except for incorporating the additional bridge cost.
Yeah, I think our costs are reflective of. I don't think there's been. Our costs are always based on year of expenditure, so that's some. So I think that's a question that let us figure that out. Figure out what I'm not clear what the question is, so I don't want to give the wrong answer.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep, no worries. Robin Chase. I think you should be able to unmute yourself, Robin. Oh, there you go.
Okay, hi. I am a lurker on the I-90 task force, but a long time urban transportation person.
Yes.
And when I look at we have the I-90 plan now has, and there's been a lot of back and forth in this, should it be 4 lanes each direction, so 8 lanes across, or 3 in that throat area? There's been a lot of back and forth. And when I listen to what you're the proposal today to add additional tracks that go through West Station and the storage, the plan is to dramatically improve that regional rail use. And so I look at it and I think, okay, by 2035, when this gets done, if you accomplish everything that you are now building for with mass transit, have you circled round to say, okay, that would reduce the volume of cars on I-90? And so I feel like we've maximized, we've gone for the large number of cars by putting in 8 lanes on I-90, and now we're expanding the rail, which is of course what I think we're going to want by 2035, and we will have had all those years without 12 lanes accessible. And so I just look and I think, have you done the recursive look? And is this a way to say, you know what, given volumes of traffic and what we expect to happen at transit and with transit use, we don't need that many lanes on the highway?
So we have done that analysis. We will continue to do that analysis. That analysis again will be part of what's provided when we release the document. But just as a quick aside, traffic, we're building for, I don't know, 2050. I think that's probably our horizon year. Traffic will increase over that time just as background growth, but there's also going to be millions of square feet created in Alston. That's all going to bring traffic. With you, our hope is most of it is on the commuter rail, but the commuter rail is, even with 30-minute frequencies, there is a constraint about how much the commuter rail will carry. So we are doing that balancing test, and we will release our data as part of the DEIS-DEIR.
I just want to add that we know that our goals are 0 emissions by 2050, and 2035 is really close to 2050.
Yep.
And we have seen study after study, and the state has also made this point, that what we need to see is significant mode shift. And we also know that if you build it, they will come. And so if we build 4 lanes of traffic, of highways, it will be filled. And if we build more transit and that's your alternative, it will be filled. So I think infrastructure is destiny, and we are building what we will get. So I hope you think hard about that as you build in the number of lanes.
Thank you, Robin. Any other questions or comments? I would like to, so Susan, can you put up your last slide? Never mind. It's too hard for you to take control of the screen. So Susan's last slide talked about how we are working with Federal Highway to see if we can possibly separate off Cambridge Street, not from our project, but as an early action item, phase 1, to try to get that work underway and get that obligation to happen. We cannot do that without the MPO support. We would need an MPO tip amendment. we would, if the MPO is interested, we would like to do that this month. But we are mindful that it is the MPO's prerogative to discuss this and decide. Jen, you have a hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just wanted to express appreciation for you and Susan and MassDOT for responding to this board's request to share about this project, and especially to do so at a time well before all the major design decisions have been taken. Of course, to be able to receive the comments and questions that both board members and members of the public have. It really speaks to this board being a key stakeholder and a partner in such a regionally significant project. Second, I just wanted to take a moment to share kind of from the City of Boston's perspective why we feel so strongly that this project is worth the $2 billion cost, and how it both addresses critical needs and brings benefits to the Boston region and the Commonwealth that are really of a magnitude beyond an average repair project. So as Susan described earlier, this project realigns the Mass Pike and its tangle of off-ramps, making it easier for every Metro West commuter and safer, and crucially repairing an aging section of the Pike in a way that really substantially lowers its long-term maintenance burden. That realignment also opens up scores of acres for, as we all know, much needed housing, as well as job growth. And it does also accommodate that growth by creating a West Station, this new transit hub on the Worcester Main Line with future bus connections to really key destinations like Harvard Square, Longwood Medical Area, rail connections to Kendall Square on Grand Junction. And then the project also pulls Soldier Field Road away slightly from the Charles, opening space for this new waterfront park, and then connects that park to West Station, the surrounding neighborhoods, through a really cohesive network of local streets and walking and biking paths that restores an environmental justice community's access to the Charles River. So these are all, huge benefits, and it's really by advancing all of these components together that the Alston Multimodal Project will reach its promise as a regionally transformative project that leverages an investment in infrastructure to also improve safety, expand open space, build housing, spur economic growth, and shift trips, including those growth trips away from driving and towards transit, walking and biking. And that's really what's brought stakeholders to the table and around this project. That includes, of course, the City of Boston with $100 million in direct contributions. It also includes major institutions like BU and Harvard, who with Boston in conjunction with future development have committed another $200 million. It also, as Susan explained, includes USDOT, which awarded the 335 million Reconnecting Communities grant. Again, based on that same vision of reconnecting Alston, while also maintaining and enhancing crucial regional transportation assets. And we also recognize that beyond those monetary contributions, stakeholders have contributed substantial energy to shaping the project. Some of those ways that the project has already changed, were described earlier in terms of being at grade and the changes to the river front path. As another example of folks being involved and contributing, the city is running a public beacon park yard planning process to really shape the growth of that future neighborhood. And finally, we do appreciate MassDOT for forming the Alston Multimodal Task Force in recognition of this high amount of interest and investment in the project. Task Force members have brought great value to the process, and we're encouraged to hear that some of these subgroups are going to be starting up again. Now, as with any major project, there are elements that we would like to see improved. Because so much of the potential benefit really hinges on how roadway, rail, housing, open space all fit together. It's really important that we all continue working together across agencies, municipalities, private stakeholders to make sure that these decisions we're taking align with our collective vision of the future. And that does include decisions about how to best utilize the rail assets that we've heard about today that do serve this area, the region, and the Commonwealth. So we see that there's plenty of work to do, and yet we also really appreciate MassDOT's focus on trying to move this project forward and do so, balancing the, intense interest of the public and getting it right. We're glad they're moving, continuing to try to find ways to move design, engineering, geotechnical work. And I will say from the city's perspective, we do support this approach that David Moeller and Susan Harrington, brought forward of trying to find ways of advancing early action items like the preliminary engineering and the utility relocation work for the overall project. And also those, elements like reconstructing the aging Cambridge Street Bridge to be gentler and more accessible to all modes and abilities. Another item of, public interest. We're replacing and realigning the Franklin Street Bridge, introducing a sound wall that supports a new bike path on Lincoln Street. We feel like all of these elements are appropriate as early action items because they do respond to really long voice community priorities. And they've also achieved a level of broad conceptual support from stakeholders. And that kind of makes us feel comfortable with this, board kind of responding to that request to obligate the federal funds, the Reconnecting Communities grant funding to them. What also makes us comfortable here is that MassDOT has made a commitment to the city that they're going to, continue, that one, these individual designs haven't yet been finalized, and that the shape of the overall project will take isn't going to be prematurely constrained by advancing these elements now. So it's our hope really that we can achieve some early wins on these items we agree upon and kind of build our capacity to work in partnership through many of the complex decisions that we need to take together in the coming years. We're committed to coming to the table with all stakeholders, locally, regionally, statewide, and delivering a project that works for all of us. And so I guess to that note, I have two kind of questions. One is a confirmation quickly, and then kind of a process suggestion. The first is on that final slide, it says that the concept will continue to be communicated publicly. And so I just want to say that from the city's perspective, we feel it's important for that concept not just to be reviewed, but really for stakeholders and the public to be engaged in developing that concept. So I just wanted to check in and confirm that that's, it seems like that's still the case with the task force, and that will, so yeah.
Yeah, I can say absolutely on that one. That's an easy answer. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And then I guess that would take me to kind of a suggestion of, it sounds like what MassDOT would need to kind of be able to secure, continue advancing the conversations with Federal Highway and to kind of secure the funding for the phased approach with those early action items is for us to amend the TIP. I know that doing so would need to happen on a pretty expedited timeline. So I'd like to propose that we kind of follow the same process we did earlier with the first $10.3 million obligation, where we motioned to amend the items, into the TIP, and then tabled the final vote on that to the subsequent meeting to give the public and other members time to kind of, ask further questions and process and follow up. And then, that would then make us feel more comfortable at that the next meeting, voting to kind of waive the public comment period to be able to take advantage of this, funding opportunity that is, extraordinary.
Excellent. So Jen, here's what I would suggest. Why doesn't the city make a motion and just so everybody understands what we're talking about? We are amending the Cambridge Street Bridge project in as an early action item for Alston. That project would be funded with $200 million of discretionary grant funds and $50 million of MassDOT match. Okay, does not implicate Harvard's match, does not implicate the city's match, it's MassDOT's match. We would, the motion would be to amend that money into the tip. If we get a second, we then won't vote because Jen will immediately make a motion to table that till the next meeting. And we will then vote on that tabling motion. And we would instruct staff to make sure everybody in the public and, you know, put it on the website, tell everybody in the public you can possibly tell that we are considering doing this, taking this final action in 2 weeks. And if they want to comment or come to the meeting, they should do so. Does that work for you, Jen? Is that what we're talking about? I think that's what we're talking about.
Yes, that sounds accurate. The one thing I would note is my understanding was that the ask was not just for the Cambridge Street, but for those bundle of, I think, 5 items that were on the slide.
Yes. All right. So then why don't you make the motion? And like I said, if we get a second, we're then going to call, Jen's going to keep her hand up. We're going to call on her to table the motion to the next meeting. All right. All right, Jen, you want to make the motion to amend the tip to reflect the slide that Susan showed up?
So I will make a motion to amend the tip to reflect the bundle of I think there were
Early
5
action
items, early action items that were shown. And I wonder if it would be helpful to kind of, if we can pull that slide up for folks to see what it is we're amending.
Yeah, Susan, can you take control of the screen and put that slide up before I call for a second?
I can share as well, David, if you like.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah, Derek,
Yep.
can you share
Okay.
it?
Yep. Can you see this okay?
Yes, that is it.
Okay.
So then again, so we've got Jen's motion. I'm going to call for a second. I, of course, as chair, will allow discussion, but then before any vote, we will let Jen make the motion to table. So is there a second on the motion to amend the tip to reflect an early action item? John Bouchard.
Yes, I would second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that motion at this time? Lynn Diggins.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's funny because at the end, Jen asked pretty much the question that I was going to ask about the process, because I do support doing this meeting, and that's partly what I was getting at with my question. Because I mean, I'm in favor of the early start, because even though you say it won't affect the cost, given that delay tends to result in an increase in cost just from inflation. From that point of view, I'm happy to see us get started on the elements in which we are in agreement. So yes. And if this is what you meant by we needed Fed action in order to do the phased approach, then that would answer my question that I was going to ask. But if there is other things that we're waiting for the Feds on before we can do the phased approach, then I'm curious as to what that is. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So yeah, I can answer. I will answer that question, Lynn. This is not the Fed action. This is a precursor to the Fed action. I mean, the Feds won't say yes unless the MPO has amended it in, okay? Because there's no point in them saying yes, because if the MPO has said no, the Feds don't have to say yes or no.
Right.
We are working with them. We have asked them to consider this as an early action. We have asked them to allow us to clear the Cambridge Street Bridge project separate from the overall project as an early action. It won't affect the MEPA schedule, NEPA schedule of the overall project, but it will split this off as an early action item. The Feds have to decide if they are comfortable with splitting it off, and if so, are they comfortable with then allowing us to obligate the money for this project? Those discussions are ongoing. Those discussions will continue. It is ultimately a federal highway decision. We certainly, they know what case we've made and what we hope the answer is. But if part of this 2-week delay, is, aside from the public comment period, is if in that 2 weeks the Feds tell us, no, we can't accommodate your request, then we will come back in 2 weeks and tell the MPO the Feds said they actually couldn't accommodate our request, and we won't act on this amendment.
Sure. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Eric Barassa.
David, thank you for that clarification. And just to be clear, the funding source is the Reconnecting Communities grant?
$200 million of the Reconnecting Communities grant. And, again, I say $200 million. Before we vote on it, there will be an actual tip amendment on the screen that people can see. $200 million is a rough estimate for the Cambridge Street Bridge. I don't have an estimate for any of the early action utility and earthwork. It may be included in that $200 million. I just don't know yet. But $200 million is roughly what federal funds we would program. And then it would be matched again with MassDOT funding, not City of Boston, not Harvard University, not BU. MassDOT would provide the $50 million match.
And the feeling is that like this bridge needs work regardless, right?
Yes, this bridge, as I think Jen said in her comments, this bridge is the reason this bridge is part of the project is because the community, I'm going to say demanded, and I don't want it to sound like that's a criticism. The community demanded of us that it become part of the project, right? And the reason it's a replacement instead of a reconstruction is the community said, no, we need this bridge fixed as a replacement. I think this is a win for everybody. I don't think anybody objects to what we want to do to the Cambridge Street Bridge. And as Jen said, and I committed, we won't do it without full public process around that part of the project.
Great, thank you.
Yep. So, Jen, do you want to make another motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to table my original motion to the next meeting.
Right. So again, the first motion was to amend the tip and waive the public comment period. This motion is to table that motion so that we can allow 14 days of public comment so that we can hear what people want to say. Lynn Diggins.
I'll second that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now on this one, we're going to have a vote. Motion having been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Certainly. David Muller,
Yes, and thank you very much.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes, thank you.
John Romano,
I believe John may have had to step away.
thank you. Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes, to table this to December 19th.
Anna Switlikowski,
Anna Swilakowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
calling again. Thank you. Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kayla Sauer stepping in for Kristen Guichard, yes.
thank you. Acknowledging, and Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Melissa Tentopoulos, once more calling on Melissa Tentopoulos. I see, understood. Rachel Benson. Rachel Benson also messaged that she is away. And then Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
With that, I'm going to do a quick count here. This motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all very much. And we will, as I said, take this up as the first action item on our next meeting, which I believe is on the 19th, I think. What's next on our agenda? Oh, and thank you, Susan, for your presentation. Really well done.
Thank you, everyone.
Next up on our agenda is strategies for environmental outreach and engagement. Stella Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to be brief because I know this has already been a long meeting, but hi everyone, my name is Stella Jordan. I'm the Public Engagement Program Manager at the Boston Region MPO. I'm really excited to present the results of a discrete study funded in the FFY 2024 UPWP called Strategies for Environmental Outreach and Engagement. This study explored best practices and local preferences for engaging and building relationships with environmental stakeholders, and informed recommendations for ways that we can more intentionally and effectively incorporate environmental perspectives and climate resilience priorities into our transportation planning work, and be an effective partner and leader in regional climate action. A report is posted to the MPO calendar for your reference. And before we move on, I'd like to just take a quick moment to acknowledge Judy Day, our former Climate Resilience and Air Quality Program Manager, who recently left the MPO for a position in the town of Hopkinton. Judy and I came up with the idea for this study together and carried it out as a collaboration between the resilience and public engagement programs. And I think that Judy's role in this project will really leave a lasting mark, not just on our resilience-focused program work, but really the MPO's approach to engagement, long-range planning, and project prioritization more broadly as well. So if we could go on to the next slide, and the next one, please. So to kick things off, I want to briefly touch on our current public engagement process and priorities, and sort of where this study came from. So the purpose and intention of the MPO's public engagement program is to ensure that all people who live, work, and travel through our region have meaningful opportunities to learn about and participate in the regional transportation planning process, including opportunities to help shape decisions that impact their transportation experiences. We prioritize making sure that communities who have been negatively impacted by transportation planning decisions in the past, who face barriers in access, and those whose perspectives are currently underrepresented in our planning process have these opportunities to engage with us, and that we fully understand and incorporate their needs and priorities into our work. And part of how we do that, which I'm sure many of you have already heard me discuss in other engagement presentations, is by assessing what stakeholders and communities we are hearing from and where there are areas we may not be as tapped into, where we want to grow representation. For the past couple of years, one of those areas where we realized we needed to grow representation is in the environmental space, where our work would really benefit from being more tuned into the range of environmental and resilience-focused perspectives in our region. Next slide, please. So there are many ways that transportation both impacts and is impacted by the environment, so it's essential for the MPO to engage with stakeholders focusing on these issues. For example, transportation is and will continue to be impacted by climate hazards such as flooding and extreme heat, and transportation in turn is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions and can also impact water quality through runoff. So engaging with stakeholders focused on environmental topics like these ensures that a wider range of voices are heard, which can help our work be inclusive of local values and concerns and improve the environmental perspective in our investments, studies, and long-range planning. Next slide, please. So to kick off this study, we consulted a variety of sources. These included academic research on climate communications and engagement, public participation in environmental justice plans, environmental studies, and policy documents from other MPOs across the country, reports and best practices documents from the US DOT and other federal agencies, and publications from professional associations such as the APA. Next slide, please. And across all of these materials, we found a lot of best practices related to climate communication and engaging people effectively on environmental issues. We also found a lot of information about how to effectively communicate and contextualize climate change and resilience related issues to different types of audiences and communities in order to best match different perspectives and values that they may hold. And from this research, we also developed a matrix of how and when different strategies and tactics can be deployed most effectively during a project or engagement effort, really to maximize the level of involvement stakeholders can have in relation to project goals and desired outcomes. And I highlighted relationship building here because across all of the research that we reviewed, this concept came up again and again. The most effective way to engage and communicate with stakeholders about environmental topics, and I think obviously this is also true for other topics, is to intentionally create really solid foundations of trust and reciprocity, which allow you to better understand priorities and needs and build meaningful engagement throughout and across different projects and processes. Next slide, please. During the literature review, we came across several really interesting examples of environmental engagement work that other MPOs were doing. So we set up a few interviews to better understand their approaches and experiences. We interviewed the Broward MPO in the Fort Lauderdale, Florida region, the North Front Range MPO in the Fort Collins, Colorado region, and the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, which is the MPO for the Chicago region. We also spoke to peer agencies closer by, including MAPC, folks at the City of Boston, and CMRPC, to name a few. And I'll just briefly call out that some of these different approaches we learned about that really stood out to us included a broad vulnerability assessment framework that can be applied to specific local contexts to study and address resilience concerns in Broward, an environmental justice plan document to formalize policies around engaging with EJ communities and addressing their needs in other plans and projects at the North Front Range MPO, and also community-centered advisor groups tasked with advising on MPO work from environmental and equity lenses in Chicago. Next slide, please. We conducted 2 surveys, one for municipalities and one for advocacy and community-based organizations, to understand the priorities of environmental stakeholders in our region and identify opportunities to collaborate and inform our own resilience work. And we saw a great response rate with 71 responses from unique entities, although some had multiple respondents across both surveys. We also heard from a really wide range of stakeholders throughout the region, including municipal staff we hadn't previously been in touch with at all, and organizations ranging from statewide environmental policy advocates to neighborhood level community associations tackling local environmental justice issues. Next slide, please. We asked respondents what their top environmental priorities were. Climate resilience and environmental justice were top responses across both municipal and advocate respondents. And in general, we saw a lot of overlap across the board here. And we also asked what engagement and communication strategies respondents use in their own communities and what has been effective. And we found that contextualizing environmental and resilience topics in terms of specific local issues was the most effective in generating community interest and engagement across both municipalities and advocates, which echoed findings from our literature review as well. Both advocates and municipalities also indicated that they use public meetings and events the most frequently to engage with community members about environmental topics and supplement that with digital communications. Next slide, please. We also asked respondents whether they wanted to be more involved with the MPO's work as it relates to the environment. 83% of both advocates and municipalities said they do. And when we asked how folks want to engage and be involved, both advocates and municipalities expressed interest in participating in small focus group style discussions and attending larger events and meetings hosted by the MPO and or our partners at MAPC. Next slide, please. Another question I want to highlight is how folks indicated that we could support their work. We saw pretty high interest across all of these suggested ways of providing support for both municipal and advocate respondents. Folks were very interested in working towards tangible changes in their communities with our support, and also in having more opportunities to collaborate with others in the region who are also working on environmental issues. Next slide, please. Several survey respondents also indicated that they would be interested in a follow-up conversation with us to dig deeper into their responses and discuss priorities more directly. So we held follow-up interviews with 8 municipal staff and 10 representatives of advocacy and community-based organizations, and we compensated those advocate and CBO stakeholders for their time. Several themes emerged from our stakeholder interviews, including that there was a broad desire for more education and accessible information about the MPO and our work, including how we fund projects. There was a desire for more spaces and opportunities for environmental stakeholders to connect and collaborate with one another and with us. There was particular interest in ways to facilitate collaboration between advocates, municipalities, and regional and state agencies, especially in project development. And there were asks for more support from the MPO in advancing key environmental initiatives, such as access to green space and climate adaptation. We also heard some really great examples of work that's planned and underway in many different communities already, and identified several concrete opportunities for collaboration and follow-ups. We really look forward to continuing to deepen those relationships in the coming year. Next slide, please. And another way that we sought to develop and deepen relationships throughout this study was by attending external events. We attended a variety of events held by other stakeholders, from just having a presence at community meetings to participating in watershed cleanup events to tabling and sharing information about our work at Open Streets events. And whether we played an active role in programming or just listened to conversations, we found that showing up where people already were offered us incredibly valuable opportunities to understand local needs and priorities, raise awareness of our work to new audiences, and build relationships. Next slide, please. We also held our own event in September, which was a walking tour of the Neponset River Greenway. Huge shout out to the Neponset River Watershed Association for collaborating and co-hosting this event with us. A shout out to a couple of our board reps for participating as well. It was a really great opportunity to work with NEPRA and test out some new strategies for partnership, as well as to connect directly with community members and other interested stakeholders and discuss the connections between climate resilience and transportation. This event was, I think, a great example of one of the ways that the MPO can help create and facilitate spaces and opportunities for environmental stakeholders to connect. Next slide, please. So the insights that we gained from reviewing best practices, surveying and interviewing stakeholders, attending and hosting events, and building relationships throughout this study led to several recommendations for ways that the MPO can continue to build on this body of work and continue to deepen our connections to environmental perspectives and priorities. We'd like to create more spaces where we can continue to engage, share knowledge, and collaborate with environmental stakeholders, and also where folks can just connect with one another. We could do this via a combination of information sharing forums, focus groups, and events like the one we hosted during this study. We'd also like to set up a newsletter to share information about environmental topics, projects, funding opportunities, and events relevant to the Boston region with stakeholders. And related to that, we want to incorporate the best practices in environmental and climate communication into our ongoing engagement activities to help more audiences engage with and relate to our work. As I mentioned earlier, we also want to continue engaging in other stakeholders' work. We recommend tracking environmental events and encouraging a rotation of staff and even board member attendance at these events, with processes for reporting back on insights and identifying collaboration opportunities. We also want to cultivate connections with stakeholders that weren't as deeply engaged during this study, including environmental justice communities, and we'd like to dedicate a portion of time throughout each year to intentionally connect with EJ groups. And if we go on to the next slide, our final set of recommendations is focused around ensuring that the input and feedback gained from these new relationships and engagement approaches really is meaningfully incorporated into the MPO's programs, planning work, and investments. Some of this can be done through the Resilience Program. We plan to leverage our stakeholder relationships to guide future program initiatives, technical assistance, and data analysis, and ensure that our resilience work is informed by and benefits regional stakeholders. Similarly, the engagement program can help develop and formalize new strategies and processes for ensuring that engagement is tailored to the needs and context of intended audiences and intended outcomes, work to better connect engagement to decision-making processes, and ensure follow-up. We especially recommend ensuring that other programs, such as the LRTP and TIP, are informed by feedback from environmental stakeholders and priorities as well, and that we close the loop to show how feedback shapes our planning and policy decisions at the MPO, as well as create space here at the board level to make sure that all of you are also tapped into what we're hearing from stakeholders. And if we go on to the next slide, in closing, I'd like to quickly acknowledge again the many contributors to this study: Judy Day, who I mentioned at the start, Jia Wang, Marnie Kopek, Sean Rourke, Sarah Philbrick, Annette Dempster, and of course, all of the organizations and municipalities who worked with us and helped shape our results and recommendations. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to all of you with a few minutes left, hopefully, and ask what stood out to you from our recommendations, areas that you'd like to see us build on here, and also what recommendations you have for staff to share input from environmental stakeholders back with you in order to help inform your decision-making. And I'm also happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stella. As always, that was excellent. And I would like to say that given how it seemed, based on the picture with Jen Rowan, it, that she really enjoyed her field trip, I think I would encourage all of us to think about doing more of that, right? To answer your first bullet point. I mean, I think it's both valuable and enjoyable, which is something that's rarely happens in MPO world. So I will now turn it over to people who have their questions. Hands raised. Lynn?
It's always valuable and enjoyable, Mr. Chair. I mean, how dare you say something like that? so
Thank you, Lynn.
You know, I have a lot of questions and a lot of suggestions. It's 12 o'clock. We always say the best for last. I mean, so I'm not going to go through them. I mean, I'll just say that it'll be great to talk with you sometime about my questions and suggestions. I mean, I'll just ask one general question though. How is it that what you learned is unique to environmental related outreach as opposed to other types of outreach? It seems like you indicated at the very beginning that you might try to apply this to other types of outreach or so I think you get my question. You know, I'll stop. If you need me to clarify, let me know.
That's a great question, Lynn. Happy to follow up with you offline as well as always. Yeah, I think, broadly, this work is very applicable to other types of stakeholders. And I think this is a really good kind of test case of some of these strategies that we could build out in other contexts. For us, and the reason that we began this study was because we felt that environmental stakeholders in particular were sort of a voice and a perspective that we weren't hearing from as much, and we weren't sort of as deeply incorporating into our work as we could and as we should, given the severity of issues around climate change and resilience facing our region. So I think a lot of it came from sort of that foundation, but I think to your point, as we build out this work and bring in more environmental perspectives into our work, I think we'll also be looking at other types of perspectives where we can apply these strategies in other cases.
Great, thanks. And yeah, let's definitely follow up sooner rather than later. Thank you. Bye.
Ian Rowe.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Stella, for the presentation, and for also engaging the city in this work. I know Catherine McClandis and Chris Osgood both enjoyed working, contributing and providing feedback. And I personally enjoyed joining you all on the Neponset, which is a beautiful place if anyone hasn't been along that path. Just wanted to keep things brief, but wanted to say how encouraging it is to see environmental perspectives brought in more continuously into the MPO's work. I know, can't remember if I've shared this anecdote before, but when I joined MPO staff 10 years ago, some folks from 350 Mass asked if I might join them at a meeting and share about the MPO, and it was sort of like, oh, we've not received this kind of request before, and now it's like we've moved to a point where we're actually proactively going out and building relationships and seeking out people where they are instead of waiting for them to come to us. So it's been really encouraging to see that. And the other small note I wanted to make was just I think this is another example of what I've seen in a few UPWP studies in the past, where staff is not only just conducting a literature review or work to kind of understand how to tackle an issue, but also doing some of the, testing something out and then reporting to us kind of in the learnings from that experience. So I think it's, taking a lot from that. And I guess my question is whether my assumption from, the final slides there were that this work will continue and but perhaps be incorporated into ongoing MPO programs, whether that's the engagement work or resiliency work. I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit to kind of how that work is going to be moved forward in the UPWP and the MPO staff's overall work program. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for all the comments as well, Jen. Really appreciate it and appreciate working with Boston on this study. Yeah. So a lot of the smaller items that I mentioned in my first set of recommendations are kind of already being worked into the resilience program and the engagement program. We're trying to build out, some comms, some consistent spaces for environmental engagement. That's something that we feel we can do, with the resources we already have and kind of dovetails well with program activities that are already planned. So a lot of it, yes, we will be just working into existing work. And I think kind of the second piece where we really wanted to elevate it to this conversation with you all as board members is kind of how we can draw out the insights from our relationship building and the feedback and information we're collecting from these environmental stakeholders and apply them not just to our program work, but also to the decisions that are made about our vision and goals, our investment priorities, and all of the things that come to this conversation, to this table. So I think that's another piece that we're still looking at working out, and part of it will come through, I think, updates that myself or my colleagues will bring to the conversation at relevant times. But part of it too is I would love to hear from you all, what you think makes sense in terms of
information that could support your decision making, and bring more environmental perspectives and lenses into that.
Megan, you have your hand up?
Yeah,
You wanna
if
add
you don't mind,
something?
I wanted to, yeah, if I could add something to that. I wanted to just appreciate, Jen, your one of those two comments in particular. And also really congratulate folks like Stella and Judy who have really started to implement what is, I feel, is a bit of a cultural shift at the organization, where I've mentioned this a few times at the Administration of Finance Committee meetings, and I just sort of want to also use this as an opportunity to touch on it as a whole board, is that we're really trying to shift towards looking at what we're accomplishing through our programmatic work over several years. We budget for those programs on an annual basis, which sort of kind of pushes you to think a little bit more like, well, what can I accomplish in 1 year? And with constrained resources, we can get a little bit siloed in our programmatic spaces. And what we were able to do here is leverage the discrete study kind of concept of having some additional funding to put towards not just one in this case, but actually 2 program areas of work, and bring those together as a way to sort of further advance the goals that we have that actually cross multiple groups, not just those 2 programmatic areas, but work across the agency as a whole. So as an agency, we've really been working to build out of thinking through in our, kind of in our individual programs and our deliverables for 1 year, and really think about a more multi-year comprehensive way in which these programs relate to each other and how we can utilize and access discrete funding sources to sort of support and advance that, and then have that factor into all of our work. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to just talk about how that's been a very intentional process that folks like Stella and others at the organization, particularly who oversee programs or bodies of work, have been engaging in the leadership team with, so that we can work together to figure out how to really enable those advancements towards goals, especially where you find commonalities. And I think this is just a really wonderful example of advancement towards that before we've even this started even before we really crystallized in our discussions the needs to do this kind of work. So it's almost like advanced work in that space that I really appreciate. And again, thanks Stella and Judy for being able to advance with us.
Thanks, Megan. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none. Excellent work, Stella. And I'm sure we will, Megan and Eric and I will work to figure out how to get this more frequently in front of the MPO. But excellent work, excellent job.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Yep. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Eric Barassa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I also wanted to let folks know that in November, MAPC was awarded a congestion relief program grant by Federal Highway Administration, $21.6 million grant and a $27 million program with the local match. About half the money is for the Blue Bikes system, both for expanding it as well as electrifying a number of the stations for e-bikes. And the other half are for a series of sort of transit initiatives in the city of Boston. And I will give to staff the application so that they can distribute it. But we also are looking to get this programmed on the tip, just given the urgency of trying to do everything we can to secure these federal discretionary grants. And so we will be looking for some type of action at the next MPO meeting, whether that's potentially amending it onto something that's already out for public comment, or working with staff to do an additional amendment. I just wanted to give folks the heads up about that, and I'm happy to come prepared to present more. And this is in partnership, with the city of Boston and the Blue Bikes municipality. So many of the members, I think, are aware of this. But we'll get the application out so folks are. And if in the interim anyone wants to reach out to me with any questions, I'm happy to connect on it. But I just wanted to kind of flag that for next meeting.
Thank you, Eric. I'll leave it to your discretion, but I do think at the next meeting we're taking up the amendment that included all the other discretionary grants, and that somehow timing didn't work for your, you got your grant after somehow the timing didn't work, or we dropped the ball. So I would recommend that you think about maybe trying to offer an amendment to the adoption, prior to the adoption of that amendment. But yes, but please get us all the information we need so that when you come prepared, if that's what you want to do, we all have some background sense of why we think it's a good idea and we should vote yes, if that's the case.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Tegan?
Just for further clarification on that note, Mr. Chair, what we would recommend as staff and what we'll work with you in the interim to discuss further is actually that we do this as an independent amendment with its own waiver of the public comment period, just to follow our processes a little bit more kind of to the intent of those processes as they were written in the public engagement plan. But either way, we will work with you all to have this in some format in front of the board at the next meeting.
All right, thank you, Tegan. I will leave it to staff's discretion and Eric's desires. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? Please state your name for the record. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Diggins
Lynn
seconds. Diggins seconds.
Thank you. Thank you all for your attention and participation today. And without objection, we are adjourned. See you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.